said Francisco d'Ancona.
From our channel, we know you.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Face with me, Ibrahim Mahmud. Today we're joined by Mahmud Sayyid, who will look on the issue of the annual prayer timetables. Mahmud, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Mahmud, what is your problem with praying Fajr and Isha like everyone else?
I haven't got a problem with praying Fajr and Isha like anyone else. But obviously, regarding the article and the context of that question, the issue is regarding, let's leave Isha aside. There's much more difference of opinion on that, and the actual article doesn't actually go on that issue much. It's particularly focused on Fajr time. And the problems that rises, and especially in Ramadan, or people who fast during the year, at what time you should fast, open your fast, at what time you can keep on eating until.
Well, I thought that's quite simple. You fast when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes that verse very clear in the Quran. So my question is, you bring a very radically different timetable from what seems to be the norm of the majority of this country.
Well, I don't bring it. I'd like to make that very clear. In the last few years, as Ramadan has come back closer and closer to the summertime of Europe and UK, the situation has become exacerbated in that the fast is much, much longer, extremely long, 21 hours or so. And for those who don't think this opinion is correct, it has become a much more emotional argument. And
Well, surely they have some reason to do so. You're asking people to start opening the fast at 1 a.m.
yes, that is the opinion.
2.5 hours difference to a vast majority of masajid in the UK.
Yeah, that's correct. But that's because, as I said, there is two issues really at hand. And the emotional part of the discussion, or what's arisen in the last few years, has kind of conflated the two different issues. There's been a decades-long dispute or disagreement or difference of opinion amongst the scholars, not lay people like ourselves and so forth. The scholars have debated between Fajr beginning at a solar elevation of 18 degrees and 15 degrees. I know for some people that's quite complicated, but when you calculate the time for Fajr, wherever you are, your locality and so forth, the scholars did some observations, collected the data points, provided it to astronomers, and asked them to find a technique or a method or a formula, a grand formula of sorts, that can actually help calculate the times of the prayer in whichever location and place and time that you are. And using that, some scholars came to 18 degrees, the majority, and a few came to 15 degrees. That's the decades-long debate. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years, with Ramadan coming into the summertime, and this happens only every 30 years because the Arab Islamic year is 10 days shorter than the Gregorian year. So every 30 years, this is the problem that can happen, is that the Ramadan and summertime coincide. And the emotional argument has gone past 15 degrees, and people are following a timetable which is much, much less. It's actually closer to 12 degrees, even less. And what that means is that many people are starting to follow a timetable which has never had a precedent throughout the whole of Islamic history. No scholar has ever, apart from in this time.
Let's be honest, Muslims have never lived in the UK for decades and decades and decades and centuries and centuries and centuries. So there's a need to have a fresh approach to this, surely. Maybe that's the reason why we have this different timetable, which you espouse as being opposed to a consensus.
Well, I'm not qualified to say whether UK is a new situation, but the mere fact that Muslims have been here for more than 100 years, and Muslims have been around in other northern countries around the world, for centuries. And the scholars have talked and have discussed of northerly countries and northerly situations, and have come with ijtihadat which explain what people have to do in certain places in case there's a very, very short day or a very, very long day. Either there's no light day or there's no night time, like the polar regions, for example. And there are masajid in Tromsø in Norway, and there are masajids in Inuit communities up in north of Canada. So with that being there, it's not a new situation. The scholars have sat down, they have come together. In fact, in 2009, the Muslim World League, one of the biggest fiqh councils in the world, came together to discuss this specific issue on Europe and the polar regions. And they came with solutions, and they came with answers, and those answers are actually 18 degrees. Yeah, I'm not discounting the 15-degree option, because that's also a valid opinion. But what I am disagreeing with, and what I think people should really understand, is that for whatever the reason is, in recent years, the unified prayer timetable, which is the Hizbul Ulama timetable, has been adopted by as the standard timetable by many masajid
In the UK.
in the UK in particular, and it doesn't reflect 18 degrees and it doesn't reflect 15 degrees. They don't claim it reflects any degrees. They say it's based on observations. Yeah.
So what are you looking for? What are you pushing for?
I'm pushing for and the communities and the masajid and the imams who follow this opinion are pushing for, at the very least, people to, or the masajids and the communities, and many of the major masajid in London in particular, who actually came together to unify the timetable, and they did it for a noble reason. They didn't do it for any other reason. Let's just choose what's ever easiest for everybody.
I'm sure many of them will actually say it's for unity purposes, and we need to have an approach where
That's fine.
mosques in the UK are united on prayer times.
That's a noble reason.
That goes. These are things that can strike really serious conflicts in
That's a
communities.
noble reason, but when it comes to your prayer, yeah, and when it comes to your fasting, these are very personal acts of worship.
They are, but people
And,
are following an imam. They're following a scholar. They're following a mosque. At the end of the day, you can't. In the article, you seem to have some. I was very concerned in one point. You mentioned that with the fast being a very private worship between the worshipper and his Lord, the individual obligation of a person to ensure they fast at the correct time is even more important. And you quote the ayah, as in particular, Allah mentions that the fast is for me and I'll reward it. So you then go and say, so simply replying on the decision of an imam in this matter does not remove the burden on the individual. And this issue cannot be left with masajid to decide is an incorrect approach to have. And we must exercise more care and concern relating to our own personal worship. Now, how can people understand for themselves what is the correct time and the wrong time if you have all these complicated mathematical equations? At the end of the day, the Quran is very simple. Allah's religion was revealed in a complete way by his noble messenger, peace may peace be upon him. So I don't understand why we're trying to create hardship. Allah says, fear him as much as you can. And people are, I'm sure.
It's not about hardship. Obviously, that's not the what's aimed at creating hardship. But it's and it's not rocket science either. Yeah, I'm not advocating people to go and find out and learn astronomy and find out what it is, go out there and observe it himself and so forth. Yeah, some people say you should go and do observation yourself, but we live in UK. We're talking about UK in this time. Yeah, the majority of the year it's cloudy. You can't see out in the sky. Yeah, so
it's been estimated.
Yeah, it's been estimated. Even the timetable, unified prayer timetable, the Hizbul Ulama timetable, who claim that you can't do anything but observation, they only observed on a few of the days, and then they extrapolated between that, all using formulae. So in that regards, there is scope for that, and we leave that to people who can do that. What I do advocate, though, for people, as it's a private act of worship, and in particular, this is the salah, the prayer, is the first thing that we're going to be accounted for on Yawm al-Qiyamah, yeah? On the Day of Judgment. That's the first thing we're going to be asked about. So it's not something small. It is really what defines where we're going in the Akhirah, inshallah, yeah? How good our prayer, how good our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So it's not a small matter, but it's also not that complicated for us to decide, really. It just takes a little bit of research by any individual to just understand that there are two opinions, yeah? But unfortunately, it seems in the confusion, an opinion which has never been seen in history, yeah, has suddenly been adopted as the norm.
That's quite a claim.
Yeah, and there has never been anyone who has taken an angle of less than 15 degrees, and until in the last few years, there have been one or two scholars. And in particular some who have said 12 degrees.
But this may cause division. It may cause real serious strife and potential conflicts. I mean, we're trying to bring people together in this country. I'm sure, as you're aware.
So then, if you were to bring people together, then wouldn't we bring them together on what would you say the majority opinion? So there's about 6 or 7, 8 major fiqh councils around the world, of which the absolute majority follow 18 degrees or even more. Some in Egypt follow 19 degrees and 20 degrees. Yeah, whereas in America, which was one of the only, the Northern American ISNA fiqh council. Was the only council to actually follow outside of 18 degrees and actually follow 15 degrees. The other opinion, which I said that is there. And even they, in 2011, in September, changed their opinion and adopted 17.5 degrees. My point is that the scope, if anyone's going to have a different opinion, if we're going to look at the prayer times, then choose between the two at the very least.
But this is very
But
depressing.
the other opinion has never been there.
This is very depressing. What can people do? What can people do? If you're advocating that people should be pushing for a safer prayer timetable, which is one, it seems that way as we advocated that people should be better safe, and should be certain about their prayer timetable. That's a really noble thing to do. But at the end of the day, people feel this can make someone feel very hopeless.
I mean, some people they say it's not about taking the safer or the harder option. By the way, yeah. I mean, some people call it the harder the prayer, but a harder prayer time to follow. But I mean, what was ironic last year, I had a colleague or a shopkeeper in my area in Leytonstone. And he looked at the two different prayer timetables. One masjid which said 3:50 a.m. was Fajr, and another one down the road which said 1:08 a.m. For Fajr, I think, or 1:10 in the morning for Fajr. And he said, why is it so different? And he couldn't understand the issue, and he was confused. But the irony actually is he wasn't complaining about. So I prefer to follow the 1:10, not because I'll be safer. But actually, so that just means I can pray Tarawih, I can eat quickly, pray Fajr, and then go to sleep. It's just easier for me. So I mean, there is that debate. This is the harder option. Why are you making things more difficult? But actually, there are two sides. I mean, there are some easy aspects of praying at that time, and there are some harder aspects of praying at the later time as well. But again, the issue is what to do with masjids, and if your masjid doesn't follow that time, please bring the issue up and say, look, we are saying that there are two different times. The time you're following hasn't got actually any basis.
So Mahmud, what on earth is 18 degrees in reality? How does that look? How would it look like?
Okay. For many people who don't understand 18 or 15 degrees or this whole concept of degrees, I mean, I've heard a lot of people say, I don't care about these degrees. I can go outside, and especially these group of scholars say, we've gone and observed this time and it's not the same as your time. Now, first and foremost, the wealth, the hundreds, maybe thousands of scholars who go for the opinion of 18 degrees across the world, from Sheikh Taqi Uthmani, the Mufti of Pakistan, and he mentioned that 80 to 95% of all the masjids from Deoband and so forth, from the Middle East to Egypt, to the Muslim World League in Europe and so forth, and to America, all of them follow pretty much between 17.5 and 20 degrees when it comes to things. So what are these degrees? Yeah.
What are these degrees? Because people will be saying, they have been following a timetable for years and years and years. Is there, and they will feel like this is some sort of attempt or plot or ploy to introduce some sort of artificial timetable in their eyes, where this has been an established norm in most massages in the UK for a long time. Yeah. So why now? Why are you calling for this now?
Well, yeah, I mean, one thing first, the established timetable, no, that's not the established timetable. This unified prayer timetable only came in the last few years, a couple of years, There have been other timetables that have been lauded in the past, but I have people who've been around the UK, my parents and so forth, for over 30 plus years, and they actually recall a time where the times were this time for Ramadan at 1 o'clock in the morning. So I think it's a matter of that many people haven't seen this time, and so they're thinking this is something that totally new. So it's not the case. What are degrees? The degrees are when this. If you imagine this is the where we are on Earth, the horizon here, and the sun is going around, rising from the east and falling down to the west, So in the morning till sunset. Then the sun goes below the horizon, and it comes back up again. But before it actually comes up to sunrise, we still do see light in the sky. Yeah, because as it's coming back up, the light's shooting from the sun up. Yeah, and that's increasing the light more and more and more until we get complete brightness when the sun actually appears over the horizon itself. So while the sun is at an angle from the ground of about 18 degrees below, that is what the majority of scholars at that point have said they have observed the Shar'i sign for Fajr, yeah, the white thread from the black thread appearing in the sky. Some scholars have said no, that happens at 15 degrees, so slightly higher, yeah, so Fajr is slightly later, yeah. And as I said, in recent times, a very strange opinion has become quite prevalent in the UK in particular, and that is 12 degrees or less, yeah. But that's the simple explanation of what the degrees, where they've come from. So it's not that the scholars have actually gone to astronomers, Muslim or non-Muslim astronomers, and said, look, tell us, here's the phenomena, tell us the angle which this happens at. That's not the case. Rather, the way it's happened is that over hundreds of years, decades, they've collated data of observations of specific times when things are happening in specific locations, provided that data to astronomers, who they then asked, take that data and extrapolate it and make it into either an annual timetable or give us a formula that we can use for the entire world.
Now, obviously, this is a very serious issue, like you mentioned. This goes right to the heart of people's personal, intimate worship. Now, those things are can't be always easily understood by the layman. They actually are in need of knowledge, of scholars, of imams, of institutions, of mosques. You have here some of the most major institutions and organizations, mosques in the country, who observe a different later timetable that you've criticized so far. Tell me, there's a challenge here. You have to acknowledge that people are not for the table willy-nilly. They must have had some reasoning, some sort of understanding. I think that you are giving them a bit of a unfair approach here.
Well, a couple of years ago, when this unified prayer timetable was adopted by some of the major masajid in the UK, from Regent's Park Mosque to Islam Masjid, and from that, a lot of the smaller masjids generally follow their times anyway, and so they adopted that. Now, when I spoke to a number of these imams, part of these major masajid, who are actually in the meeting itself in which they decided on the unified prayer timetable, and they actually have a caveat, by the way, in their notes. They said, look, we're uniting on this timetable, but we are still open to discussion that if there is a problem with it, we are willing to actually change to the better time. Yeah, so they're not closed.
Oh, very simple. Then why don't you just go and speak to them?
And we have, I have personally, and one thing that became quite clear was that, especially with one of the imams, he said that, look, we're going for 15 degrees. We don't want to talk about it. We follow a different opinion. We think the 15 degrees is the better time, and that's what we're following. And I had to stop him in his tracks there, and I said, Sheikh, I'm very sorry, but that's not 15 degrees. 15 degrees is this. And I showed him the times as calculated through the formulae. What you're following, if you backward engineer the times that you've come and put it into the formula, it comes back to sometimes around 12 degrees, and in some cases even less than 12 degrees. And at that point he stopped and he goes, well, I didn't know that. So it seems there is a confusion, there is a problem, but I think there's some difficulty and there needs to be that pressure put on by, I think, our community, on imams to research on why that was done and hopefully changing at least back to one of the two opinions.
There will be difficulty and pressure for the community itself. People who really want to fast, who are not at the position or where they're ill or where they're carrying and all the rest of it, but they struggle as it is. And what you are essentially going to do, willingly or unwillingly, is take a whole load of people who would have been able to fast on the timetable and not going to be able to fast anymore because it's already at 21 hours.
Yeah.
And you're advocating for near towards 23 hours.
No. It's at 21 hours.
Okay.
I mean, the 12 degrees actually brings it much lower.
Okay.
Yeah, to about 19.
Okay.
Now, regarding the hardship on people, that's a totally different issue. Yeah, with regards to fasting, we're not allowed to fast if it makes us ill. Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's actually a sinful act to knowingly fast and harm your body. Yeah, whether you've got diabetes, whether you've got some medical thing, or
We're
whether
not
you're
talking about
pregnant.
ailments here. We're talking about people who are healthy but are
Elderly
will find
or
it
young
difficulty.
or so forth.
There you are.
I mean, with all due respect, it's not myself who's only fasting, and it's not only a few people fasting. There are many masajids, even in the UK as well, who do fast, and their communities have a wide spectrum of people who follow them. You know, and as we all know, with regardless whichever country you're in, even here in the UK, 19 hours is also very long. And everyone who doesn't fast or practices fasting throughout the year, they do find it incredibly hard in Ramadan. But I mean, I think I speak for everyone else, and yourself included. The first week or the first few days of Ramadan is always hard. But after that, it becomes quite normal almost. Yeah, after a few days, I can cope with this now. It's my body's normalized to having that. In the same way, for 21 hours, it's exactly the same thing. So my parents who are 70 plus, they're able to fast without any problems. I have colleagues whose children, young teenagers, have no problems at all. But yes, of course, it's difficult. No doubt, it's difficult. Yeah, and medical professionals will tell our community, you need to be very well prepared, especially here in countries like this, when the fast is this long, on what you eat, how you hydrate yourself at the night time, how you maybe change and adapt your schedule during the day for this type of long summer Ramadan.
And then in reality, then how do we move forward? We need to get to a stage now where people are, in your words, trying to unite upon what is more correct, what is more in line with, it seems to be a number of major fiqh councils around the world.
Yeah, the majority. I mean, a fiqh council, I might be naming the Muslim World League. They're not one person. The Muslim World League is made of thousands of scholars from all the different schools of madahib. Yeah, so we're not talking about a one person, because
so you're not advocating a very hard and
very
conservative approach
the
to
problem
fasting.
That's happened with the discussion becoming so emotional in recent years is that people have started to ridicule the opinion which is actually the standard opinion across the Muslim world. They've actually ridiculed it and said that and no, it's ridiculous, it cannot be the case. Yeah, or we are in a different place and it doesn't count for us. Yeah, and unfortunately the consequence of that is that the majority of people don't see the actual standard opinion. So now you're speaking to me as in this conversation here, you've come with a really extreme opinion, whereas really if we sit down and look at the facts, we'll find that this allegedly extreme opinion is actually the standard adopted opinion across the Muslim world, and in fact that the 12 degree, which is being followed by the many masajid here in the UK, is in fact the strange and the extreme opinion.
In terms of opinions then, how do you change opinion? How do you make sure that how would you attempt to move the community towards this 18 degrees timetable? Because clearly, if you're advocating in the position where there are a vast majority, if not all the major fiqh councils in the world, are following 18 degrees or 17.5 or all the rest of it, how do you practically move forward towards that?
I feel that, I mean, I'm not an expert in Islamic.
But you're well informed. You're aware of the issues. You've engaged imams and all the rest of it.
And that's my point. I think there are plenty of people in our community. You don't have to be a student of knowledge. You don't have to be a scholar. You can read this issue. There's been plenty of papers which are out there on the World Wide Web, which you can go follow and see. There's some links from the article as well for that. And if you go there, look for it yourself, and then approach your committee and your masjid and say,
well,
look,
you say
please
approach
consider.
your committee and masjid, but let's be honest, the average person is going to really struggle at times to approach them. You'll get a few special characters. What many people will probably argue, probably would like to see, is that there needs to be imams or scholars who may adopt this opinion to be pushing for this opinion, to be influencing and to have those conversations. Where are these people?
I mean, there are imams who are speaking on this quite strongly. But they seem to be drowned out at the moment due to Ramadan possibly being in this period of time when it's at its peak length. Yeah, so to discuss this issue becomes very emotional. Yeah, so I still suggest, I think the best line of to go forward is that we do approach our imams. The imams, I'm sure, in most masjids do listen. Say, look, I've heard this opinion. At least to notify them, look, and they're actually saying this is not the opinion of the Ahnaf, the Hanafis, or the Shafis, or the Malikis, or the Hanbalis. The majority of fiqh councils are actually against this opinion. How come we following this?
And very quickly, just to end, one thing that many people will face from what I will assume is that it may not be an issue with the imams at all. It may be the issue of the committee members, committees or mosque management who are lay people themselves sometimes and are trying to make sure they can accommodate for their community. And again, we mentioned the issue of people who are not necessarily ill or carrying or who have some medical ailments or conditions, but people who are just about struggling as it is. This is a real challenge.
I think personally,
you make it sounds very easy, but come on, Mahmud, this is a very difficult thing.
I mean, to the people who find it difficult, I'd like them to ask the questions themselves that, what if you were fasting at the wrong time? What if you were eating while the actual right timetable or the majority timetable actually states that fasting starts much earlier? You're jeopardizing your fast. I mean, we can all pray a bit later, closer to sunrise, and we'll still catch Fajr. But your actual fast itself, an act of worship between you and Allah alone, you might be jeopardizing it. So it's really incumbent on all of us to try and find for ourselves personally if this is the correct time that we're following or not. And for the masajid and the committees and the imams, really to take a step back and really look at this issue, because they're playing with people's ibadat, yeah, and it's not a simple issue. And really, they should actually at least paint the picture to the majority of people that we're taking an opinion at least which is not the standard opinion, and give the true story and allow people to make their own judgment in that regards. And of course, at the end of the day, we worship Allah as much as we are able to. So if you are unable and you are to become ill, then of course you have that concession, inshallah.
Mahmoud, we must end it there. Jazakumullah khair for your time and for joining us this evening. So I think it's really quite interesting discussion with regards to how we should try and empower and encourage people to approach and have a conversation with their mosques and their imams in regards to the times of their prayer, especially in terms of people living in the northern hemisphere, in terms of open their fast. But also I think it's really good to actually hear that people can take the facts and arm themselves with the facts and take that and bring that forward and to engage in a proactive dialogue with their Islamic centres, mosques and religious institutions. Mahmud, Jazakumullah khair for your time. And Jazakumullah khair to you too at home. Do join us again for another session with a number of other guests and articles of a pertinent nature. Do follow us on our website. And with that, I bid you wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Said Francisco d'Antonio.